Hello, I'm William Bell, soul singer, songwriter, Grammy winner, record producer. And you're listening to Talking Blues.
So, Mr. Bell, you started singing really early. I mean, you were in a choir at the age of 7. Can I ask you when you fell in love with singing?
I think it was at church at about that age of 7 that I first really fell in love with music and singing and all of that. I went to church. My mom was singing in the choir, and then I had to be in church on Sunday mornings. And I just developed a love for all of the songs and the presentations that they did in the choir and all of that.
What do you think starting with church and being in the choir taught you about singing?
Well, singing in the choir, that's one of the best, I guess, preparations that you can get, because it teaches you about expression of a lyric, how to emotionally express it. And then it teaches you just how to feel, as we call it in soul music, you're feeling what you're actually feeling at that moment, at any given moment when you're delivering that song. And so all of that came into play when I started doing secular music. So all of that came from the church.
And you started doing secular music pretty early.
I did. I started secular music. I was some friends of mine in high school dared me to enter what they call it from Memphis, Mid-South talent contest. And of course, I wasn't one like to be dared. So I entered the contest and won.
What did you sing? Do you remember?
I sang because I was doing more or less. I sang some stuff then that was like, I think that I shall never see a tree and all of that, the kind of songs from. I was working part-time with Phineas Newborn's orchestra, so I knew I was doing more jazz than R&B then, and gospel stuff. So I sang the tree song, and then I sang another jazz song with the band, and of course the jazz cut was September in the Rain. And of course I won, and one of the awards was $500 award, and a chance to go to Chicago and work with the Red Saunders band. So I went up for a weekend, worked with that band, doing jazz and stuff like that. And from that, he called back to Memphis because Phineas Newborn Sr. was a good friend of Red Saunders. And the two musicians talked to each other. He said, there's a kid that from your hometown that you should look at. And I was probably about 14 then.
That's amazing.
Yes. And so, of course, when I got back to Memphis, old man Phineas contacted me, and I started singing on the weekends at the Flamingo Room.
Now, I understand that he had to talk to your mom into doing this, right?
Yes, he had to talk to her because, of course, she was deeply religious, and she didn't really want me in the nightclubs or singing secular music and stuff. They call it the devil's music. So anyway, but I was hooked at that point. So I talked to her, and then old man Phineas talked to her, and he had two of his kids in the band, which was Calvin Newman and Phineas Newborn Jr., who played piano. And they were in their teens then, but a little older than I. They were like 19 or 20. And he told my mom that he would take care of me the same as he would his children. So she finally, after me begging, and she caved in and said, okay, but know this, you can sing on Friday and Saturday nights, but I don't care what time you come in on on Sunday morning, you're going to church Sunday morning. So that was one of the things that I had to agree to. And that was true. I had to be in church. Sometimes after singing in the club, we didn't close until 2 a.m. And by the time I got home, it was 3. And I got a couple hours sleep, and at 7 o'clock, she woke me up to go to church. So,
Okay, so the Mid-South Talent contest that you won, I mean, that was probably your first milestone. It contributed to changing your
yes.
life, right? Because you also got noticed by Lester Bihari, and did he not offer you a recording contract because of that talent contest?
Well, when I started singing for Old Man Phineas's band, they wanted us to do secular music, and all of the stuff during that era, because this is late 50s, was doo-wop.
Right.
And so I was a solo singer during the jazz and stuff like that. But I formed a vocal group in order to do the doo-wop stuff that the crowds in the clubs wanted to hear on the weekends. And so I formed the Del Rios, and a member of one of the Bahari people heard us singing one night at the club and gave us a contract to sing. So I had to write 2 tunes. That was my first involvement in songwriting. So Alone on a Rainy Night, and I think the other one was Lizzie or something. But I wrote 2 songs that we recorded as a doo-wop group, the Del Rio, with the Media Records, which was Les Behari. Nothing major happened that much, but we did get popularity in the college circuit and traveled between Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, the college circuit, tri-state. We traveled doing college gigs with the Phineas Newborn Orchestra. And so the song was popular with the college kids, but nothing nationally or internationally, anything.
If we go back to that winning that contest and you traveling to Chicago to play with Red Saunders, can you tell me what that was like to actually arrive in Chicago back then as a contest winner and to have that opportunity?
My first trip anywhere that far from home, and it was like a bug-eyed little kid looking at all of the buildings and the hustle and bustle of a city like Chicago. But luckily, somebody picked me up, and from there took me to the hotel. We stayed at I think it was the Sutherland Hotel there in Chicago, one of those, because during that time, you couldn't stay in just any hotel. Even in Chicago, it was like you stayed in more or less the Black hotels. And so we stayed at the Sutherland Hotel, but it was great as a young kid because I was introduced to the guy that had booked acts in the lounge at the Sutherland. And I could not go out into the audience, but they would let me come in and sit there and give me a Coke in the corner there and sit at a table and listen to some of the acts that they were working in the Sutherland Lounge. And I got to hear Lambert Hendricks and Ross, which is a jazz trio. I got to hear a couple of jazz acts and stuff that were playing there. And it was just wonderful, bug-eyed, but it made me realize I had a lot of work to do to learn my craft.
Okay, so you're 16, and then you're offered to join Phineas Newborn's big band, and we're talking like a 14
Big,
piece.
yeah, 14-piece orchestra.
I don't, at this point, how much exposure do you have to jazz music, and how much do you know the repertoire that you could front a 14-piece jazz band?
Well, we had rehearsals twice a week on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights. And they taught me most of the standard. I was doing some standard stuff like at high school sock hops and stuff like that, and just to raise money for the band uniforms and the football players and stuff. But all of the standard jazz stuff that was taught to me, and then after the rehearsal, they would bring me over to the piano and sit down and learn how to play and sing half tones, learn what chords that fit that particular song, and then I'd have to go home and practice on it. And so there was a process. It was like going to university, really. But a lot of the jazz musicians, he had some great jazz musicians at that time in his band. He had Hank Crawford, Charles Lloyd, not Red Price Sock, but Fathead Newman.
Wow.
And so I mean, all of those guys came through Old Man Phineas's band at the time.
I can't imagine being 16 and basically kind of learning how to sing jazz and to have a 14-piece backup band.
Yeah, and then that was just a lot of rehearsals, and then I'd practice. And then also we had to do the doo-wop and the secular stuff. So learn all of the Clovers and the Five Royals and Hank Ballard and the Midnighters, all that stuff. So that we, on Friday and Saturday nights, the Flamingo Room had a kind of a young, hip crowd, 21 plus age group. And so we had to entertain them with all the latest stuff they heard on the radio. So we did a lot of that too. So I got both ways. And then on Sunday, we had what they call a tea dance, but it was a fashion show. So they had a ladies organization that had a fashion show, and we played jazz, and I did a solo project with the big band doing A Pretty Girl Is Like a Melody, Misty, all of that stuff for the fashion show.
So at this point, you're in your late teens. Do you know you're going to be a musician and a singer, songwriter?
I didn't have any inkling at that point of being a full-fledged musician. I know that I was in love with it. But Mom wanted me to become the first doctor in the family. So all of my studies in school was in chemistry and mathematics and all that stuff to become the first doctor in the family. But I fell in love with music, and it was just something about it that just got inside me, and that was my first love. So to the chagrin of my mom and my stepfather at the time, they caved in and let me do it because it was just like that was something that I really wanted to do. But as long as I kept my studies up and was in church during the gospel thing, then during the week I could do the weekends at the Flamingo, and some weekends we would travel and do college dates and stuff.
I know that Sam Cooke was a major influence on you
Oh, yes.
and the Soul Stirrers. Did you ever think about pursuing gospel music as a career?
You know, I thought about it for a while, but then as my last year of high school, Sam Cooke went over from gospel to secular with You Send Me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had followed Sam in the Soul Stirrers career since I was a little kid, and not only them, the Fairfield Four and the Highway QC, all of those gospel groups, because I love the harmonies and the lead singers, all of the stuff that they were doing. But Sam was my hero. I loved the way he ad-libbed and phrased and all of that stuff. And it was similar to what I was doing in the clubs, because coming from the gospel church, I had that kind of voice to do all that stuff in the clubs. And when he did You Send Me, I realized then, okay, he has switched from gospel, and he switched mainly so that he could make a better living and make more money at that. But he was basically doing the same type of singing that he was doing in church. So that was the beginning of soul music, because we had what you call all that boogie woogie stuff and the blues and the rockabilly and country music, and then you had rhythm and blues with from the Atlantic days, Big Joe Turner and people, Ruth Brown, all that group. But soul music was a whole different thing. So that's when Chips Moman from Stax was up to the club one weekend and heard me in the group. And they needed a group to do backup work behind Carla Thomas's Gee Whiz. And Chips asked me if would you come over to Stax and do, it was Satellite Records then, so come over to Satellite Records and do some backup singing because I like the way you harmonize. Okay. So they paid us not that much, but I think $5 a piece or something. But we did they did the backup work behind Gee Whiz for Carla Thomas. So Jim Stewart at Stax, he and Estelle loved the group, and they didn't have a vocal group at the time. Matter of fact, they only had Rufus and Carla and the Marquis at the time, because they didn't even have Booker T and the MGs then. So they asked if we would sign with Stax as a vocal group. So as the Del Rios, we were free from our concert with media. And so we signed with Stax as the Del Rios, and I think we cut 2 or 3 45 singles with Stax. And then, of course, most of the guys in the group with me were older, and this is when we had the draft. They were drafted into the military, and that left me and Lewis Williams, who went on to form the Ovations, Lewis Williams and Ovation. They left me and Lewis doing a duo we did it for a couple of months, but he loved the harmony things, and Chips asked me if I would do a solo project. Wow. So I hadn't thought about it, but I went on tour that summer with the Phoenix Newborn Orchestra. And we traveled all up into New York, the Catskills, and different Connecticut and places doing shows in the resort areas. And when I came back, I ran into Chips again. He said, "Are you ready to record something?" So I had written a couple of songs, "You Don't Miss Your Water" being one. And I said, "Well, I've got about 4 songs written." He said, "Well, that'll be a start. Let's come in and cut a couple of 45 records on you." So I went in and did "You Don't Miss Your Water," and didn't really expect anything that much to happen. I said, well, okay, I can always start college and make my mom happy. I'll become a doctor. So we cut "You Don't Miss Your Water," I think in November of '61. And it didn't really, it was played in Memphis locally. I mean, all the stations and the bars and the juke joints were playing it all up and down Beale Street. So I was still working at the Flamingo Room. And, but I was out of high school. And so I didn't expect that much to happen. So they stopped playing You Don't Miss Your Water right before Christmas in December, and they started playing the Christmas music. And I figured that was it. Come January, I'm going to enroll in college and do all of that. So I was preparing for that, and I had gotten all of the exams and stuff, and gotten that ready for Lemoyne Orange College. And then I started getting calls from different cities that I had a #1 record. New Orleans being the first city, then Houston, then Dallas, and they were offering me money to come do concerts. And of course, going to school and being a kid, I said, well, if I make some money, then I can make my college tuition and the books and stuff that I need. So, hey, that's great. I didn't realize at the time, that, okay, I didn't start the school right away, even though I had filled out all the papers and stuff. I said, let me run out and do the concerts, make some money. First concert I did was in New Orleans, and the promoter down there, a young man named Percy Stovall. I did the first concert in New Orleans for him, and he said, well, how would you like to do 10 days for me?
Wow.
That's 10 times the money. So, and he had a section of South East USA. It went from Florida all the way over to Houston, Texas, all of Louisiana and stuff. And that's where he booked. And so he booked 10 dates on me. And each place I played, we got such a great reception. We had #1 records, and I was getting to do the promotion with the disc jockeys. So the record company was happy. I was making money. I was happy, and the promoters happy because we were drawing good crowds. And I was really, even at a young age, I was still versed in entertainment because I had been doing it for 4 years at the Flamingo Room. So it just worked out. And then, of course, I got a call from an agent, Universal Attractions out of New York, wanted me to put a tour together for me. And I'm going to tour, and this is during the summertime, and okay, yeah, I'll take the tour during the summer. So I went to New York. The first thing, I had a week at the Apollo.
Wow.
Went over well, and they wanted me to hold me over for another week. So they held me over for another week. And then they booked 30 days, one-nighters, when you had 5 or 6 acts on a bus with the band, and you traveled all over the country doing concerts, one-nighters. And that's what I did because we did it for 30 days, and then there was another theater circuit that we did that they booked a lot of stuff, and I was opening acts because I only had 1 record. But I was opening for people like Jackie Wilson, who was another one of my heroes, Benny King, and all these groups and stuff. And we all got to be friends, and Jerry Butler and all of us. So I got to know all these guys, and we were touring and making great money. I'm saying, okay, I can take care of my whole tuition for my whole 4 years of college with this. And I didn't realize after back at the Apollo with, I think it was Chuck Jackson. And my mom finally caught up with us because we had been doing one-nighters. And she caught up with me at the Apollo and called me backstage on the phone and said, you've got a letter here from the government. Mm-hmm. And of course, I said, well, did you open it? And she said, no. I said, well, open it up and read it to me. And since I didn't start the college, I got drafted. I was over 18 then, and I got drafted. and I had another hit record on the charts, and I'm drafted. So I had to, I thought I could go home and get a deferment, but that didn't happen because I was already late in going to the draft board. So when I finally got away from a tour and flew home and went to the draft board to try to get a deferment or something, I thought I could get it. And it was kind of comical later on because I walked in, I talked to the desk sergeant. I told him who I was and that I'm coming in and see about getting a deferment because I got all these, I'm an entertainer, I've got all these dates booked up and stuff. And he said, fine, just step right back here in the back. So I thought he was getting ready to talk to me back there. So I walked back into another room and there were about 5 or 6 other guys back there. And there was another guy there and he said, raise your right hands. And not knowing what was going on, I raised my right hand and took the oath. And so then I called the sergeant. I said, now I want to talk to you about this deferment, because I got some dates still coming up. He said, you're in the military, you're in the Army now. So I went from there to get my shots. And then the next morning I was in Fort Polk, Louisiana. So I went from that and I had to call home and because I had driven my car down to the draft board and I had to call home and get my uncle to come pick up my car. I had to call Dolores at Universal Attractions to say, I'm in the Army, they drafted me and I can't work the dates. I had about 9 months of touring to do. And so I lost all of that.
Wow. If we go back, can I just go back to the point where you got signed by Stax? What did that mean to you back then? I mean, did you think this was going to be your big break and things would change, or how did you view that?
I didn't really think that much of it because I was still thinking about going to college, but I figured, okay, I'm making enough money with this one record that I had cut. And then Stax wanted to do something else. So I flew home, cut some other stuff with Booker T and the MGs. At that time, they had gotten them together. And Any Other Way and all of that stuff came about. And they knew that I was a good writer, so they wanted me to write some songs for some of the other acts that they had. And so at that time, I figured, okay, I'll take a year off to do this and then go back to school. But in the meantime, I did get drafted. But I had at Stax, I was had such a good time there with the people at Stax, and we were like a family. And they made us, all the neighborhood kids and things that came in, they made us feel needed and at home. And we're doing something that we loved. We loved music, and we found out that we can make a living at it. And it was just wonderful that you're learning a craft and you're learning about the recording industry, because I was one of those artists that if I were not on tour, I was in the studio day and night trying to ask questions. What does this button do? How do you mic drums? Or all of that stuff I wanted to learn about the recording process even then, because I had run into Sam a couple of times, and he was one for the business even before it was fashionable. A lot of artists now own their own studios and businesses, but back then it was unheard of for an artist to have a publishing company or a record company and all that. And he taught me that the music is in publishing and songwriting and everything, because all of the money comes out of the artist's portion of it and all the kind of stuff that we had a long talk about. So I became interested in the business side of the music business.
Was he not one of the first artists to actually have his own publishing?
Yes, I think so. I know Booker finally, after he left, after Stax folded and he started his own, and Steve started his own. But yeah, I was one of the few artists that did. The first 5 years that I signed with Stax, it was all of the writers, publishers, and artists thing was all included in the same contract. So you were signed to Stax.
Right.
You did, and you didn't get publishing. They had, East Memphis owned it and all that. Then when the next 5 years came about, I was a little more savvy about the business. So, and then I asked, let's renegotiate the contract. I took the publishing out, I took songwriters out, all of that, and established my own publishing company. I did split publishing with East Memphis on some things. But I did own my own publishing and started my own record label, Peachtree Records.
Okay, so you talked about writing songs for other people, and one of the songs that you're known for, one of the many, is Born Under a Bad Sign.
Right.
Which is basically a blues classic. And it has probably one of my favorite lines, which is, if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. I mean,
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about the origins of that song or how it came about?
Yeah, like I said, I was in, if I were not on tour, I was always in the studio. I was in there a lot of times when Otis was cutting. I did the harmony with him on Respect and all that stuff. And he and I became good friends. So I was always in the studio because Jim would ask if they didn't have enough songs, if I had something that the other artists could do. Could I write a song for them if they were coming in? So that's why I was in the studio there. So Albert was in during a session and they recorded 3 songs on him, but he needed another song. They were in a session, you usually try to cut 4 sides during those days. And they didn't have anything. So I was in the studio. Jim asked me if I had something that might be good for Albert. And I had been writing this song for myself, but I said, well, I've got one thing that's kind of a bluesy song, but I haven't finished it. But I've got a verse, a bass line, and a chorus. And he said, well, would you sing that for Albert? And so I sang him the first verse, and Booker was at the piano, so I showed him the bass line. So he expounded on it. So that's how he and I wrote. I would chord stuff, but he would put all the embellishments and all of the fancy stuff and arrange it. So anyway, Albert loved the idea because during that time, the signs and the zodiac and all that stuff, this was doing almost like the hippie season. All that stuff was big then. And Albert loved the idea. And, but I don't know if it was widely known that Albert didn't read. And so, Jim said, well, can you finish the song up so that before Albert leaves tomorrow, he can do it?
Talk about pressure.
Yeah, pressure. So I said, well, I had some ideas in the back of my head because I was going to write it for myself. So like I said, and I knew the melodic structure, but it was a different kind of blues. It wasn't a 1-3-5 blues changes and stuff. It was a different kind of blues. So but I had a basic idea. So I got with Booker. I said, Booker, if we got to do this in the morning for the session for Albert, let's sit here tonight and write. He said, well, why don't we go to my house? I've got a piano in the den. Let's go in and write it and we'll be more comfortable. And I'll get the wife to fix something and all that. Okay, fine. So we went to Booker's house, finished the song up. Came back the next day, cut the rhythm track. And so then I'm teaching Albert the song. So Jim said, well, why don't you just feed him the lines prior to him singing? And that's basically what I did. And he was such a professional at it. He, you know, I'd feed him the line, the up and coming line, and he would sing it down. And I think we only did maybe 2 or 3 takes. And he had gotten it together and knew the song and went right through it. And then, of course, they had the rhythm section and him, and they put his iconic guitar work on it, and it just came to life. And then they put horn and stuff on it. And of course, it became a blues standard, but a different one that they started writing blues with different kind of changes to them. And then like, I noticed that the guy wrote that song for BB, Thrill Is Gone, which is kind of similar to it and all that. But there were quite a few blues things that were a little bit different after that.
Did you know that? I mean, I don't know if anybody ever knows these things, but I mean, not too long after, Cream actually recorded that song, and it's been recorded by a lot of people. I mean, it is definitely a standard.
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
I mean, it's one of those top blues songs. Did you have any inkling as to what the significance of that song was when you wrote it?
Not really when I wrote it. I knew it was a good idea and a good song. And I included that verse, I can't read, didn't learn how to write, because I knew Albert would relate to that.
Right.
And but I'd had no idea that that song would become like a blues standard. But like you said, Cream cut it. They had a monster hit worldwide on it. Jimi Hendrix cut it. Uh, Coco Taylor and Buddy Guy, and just any number of artists, iconic artists have cut that song. A lot of the European artists, the blues artists and stuff cut it. So they made a standard blues song out of it.
So how weird is that when you've written a song or you're thinking of writing the song for yourself, you give it to somebody else. As a songwriter, is that something you dream about, or as an artist, do you think, oh, I don't know if I want to give away the song?
Well, I thought about it with Albert, but Albert and I were close. He and Booker and I. Albert didn't get close to too many people. He was kind of standoffish because I don't know if it's because he didn't read or write or something, but he didn't trust too many people.
Hmm.
But with me and Booker, we just kind of clicked with Albert. We wrote, matter of fact, he asked us to write another song for him. So we wrote Left Hand Woman, Get Right With Me, and some other stuff. So, but he trusted me and Booker totally. And we would go up to, there's a food place called Four Way Grill, not too far from Stax. And we would go up there and eat lunch and stuff together and everything. But he was always just a mountain of a man, but just like a big old pussycat. It's like we'd laugh and talk. He told a lot of jokes too, and we would have fun just telling jokes and stuff. And I didn't care that much that Albert. I didn't mind that Albert recorded it and had a good hit out of it, because at Stax at that time, though, we were like a family. And we literally wanted every artist at Stax to have a hit record. So that's why we would write for different people. And I wrote for Rufus, wrote for Carla, wrote for Albert, wrote for Ollie and the Nightingales. One of their biggest hits, I Know I Got a Sure Thing. So it was just a thing that we all wanted everybody to have a hit record.
Can you talk about, you mentioned Otis Redding, and I know that he was a close friend of yours. I think you were there when he recorded Sitting by the Dock of the Bay.
Yes.
And you also wrote a tribute to King when he passed away. Tell me about your friendship with Otis and who Otis Redding was to you.
Well, when I went to basic training, my first furlough to come home, I went, of course, I was home on furlough, but I was in the studio every day. And Otis came up to Stax from Macon driving for Johnny Jenkins. And during that session, I was in on in the studio, and Johnny Jenkins didn't have enough songs to do because a couple of his things he had brought with him were not accepted or something. They wanted something else to cut on him. And they asked if anybody had anything that Johnny could do. And Otis spoke up and said, "Oh, I got this one little song here." And Jim asked him to sing it. So he worked up enough of it. Otis kept everything. He never wrote the entire song down. He'd write the first line of the first verse, first line of the second verse. He kept it up here. The horn lines, the bass lines, all of that stuff. Now he could play a little guitar, but he kept everything, the song idea up here and in his head. And so he said, I can sing it for him. So he worked it up enough and got on the microphone to sing the song for Jim. And he started singing this song. And all of during that time, we were in this theater room, and the air conditioner didn't work all the time. So we would always, during a playback, we had speakers in the studio portion of it. So we would open the front door there to the door and let some air come into the studio. So we opened the front of the studio door, and Otis had sung this song, "These Arms Are Mine," and they were playing it back on the speakers, and it was just, everybody was just mesmerized. They're like, wow. And people from the Clarity, people were sticking their heads in the door. Who is that? Who is that? So Johnny Jenkins never got "These Arms Are Mine." Jim Stewart got a new artist with Otis Redding. But Otis and I became good friends because he was new to Memphis and he didn't know the places to eat and places like that. So I would always take him around and up to the four-way where that grill was, where we ate all the time. And so we became good friends and started hanging out down there on Beale and at the clubs and stuff when he was here for 2 or 3 days. And we all were staying over there at the Lorraine Motel. So we just became good friends. And then when I did the hit record and came back from the military, Otis was a big star. And of course, it took me about maybe 3 months to because I had been overseas for over a year and a half, and I didn't hear anything but surfing music and Hawaiian music and stuff like that. So I had to reorient myself into what was happening musically in the States. So I wrote this song, and I noticed that Steve and I wrote some things together, and 2 or 3, I think David and Isaac and I wrote some things together, and they cut some stuff for me. But everything that I recorded during that little period after coming out of the military, nothing really clicked for me. So I asked Jim, I said, well, Jim, let me just take some time and more or less listen to the radio and find out musically what's happening now, because I'm kind of out of touch. And he agreed, and he said, yeah, fine. So I noticed that during that time, everybody that was bringing songs to me, they were songs that the other artists had turned down. So I'm saying, okay, because when I left to go to the military, of course, I was the top man of the totem pole. So when I came back, I was at the bottom of the totem pole because they had Sam and Dave, they had Otis, they had Carla, they had Rufus. So I'm just like at the bottom of the stack, and they had Booker T and the MGs. So I wrote "Everybody Loves a Winner," and Booker and I recorded it, That was my first big record after coming out of the military. But it got me back out to doing live performances and concerts and some of those package shows and stuff. So Otis and I did a couple of package show dates, and we clicked because we were good friends, and I knew the people that he knew in Macon. I knew his family and all of that. And so we started touring as a duo package, touring package. The agency kind of put us together, and it worked. We would do all of the auditoriums and stuff like this as a duo package. So we did that for about maybe a year, almost a year, maybe a little longer than a year. And sometimes we would ride in the same car, either my car or Otis's car, and we'd write and be creative, writing songs. Otis had his old guitar, and we'd sit there in the back seat as the driver. We had drivers and valets then. They would ride along, and we'd ride along and create. And so when he came to Memphis to do Dock of the Bay, he had just come off of having some polyps removed from his vocal cords. And he was a little bit antsy about what he would sound like in recording because the doctor did not want him to express musically and that hard edge thing that he usually did. So he was a little bit antsy. So Dock of the Bay was a different kind of song. It was kind of a up-tempo ballad for Otis. And so we went out to get something to eat after he finished recording it. And he was just a little bit hesitant. He said, I don't know how that my fans are going to take that. They used to this driving, hard drive thing. But to me, when I heard it, it was a different sound for him. And he had been doing ballads, but most of his ballads were strong, powerful vocal ballads. And this was more subdued with a melodic structure on it. And I told him, I said, Otis, this is a great song. I said, plus it's got crossover, like crossover into the pop or the what's called category. I said, it's got crossover appeal because it's a melodic thing that people can lock into the melody. And yeah, well, thank you, but I don't know. So he was kind of apprehensive. That weekend, he had a couple of dates to do. I think one was in either Cleveland or somewhere, but he was saying, well, you can ride on the plane with me, because I had a date to do at a theater in Chicago. He said, why don't you just go with me on Friday, and I'll while I play my date. And I think it was at Leo's or something, and it was in Cleveland or somewhere. And he said, why don't you go with me to play my date? And what I'll do is drop you off in Chicago. That way you don't have to try to go through the airport and get a flight and all that. Okay, fine. So that was the idea. But at that night, there came a big snowstorm on the East Coast. Chicago was snowed under. So the promoter called me and canceled my date at the theater. So I had to tell Otis, well, no, I'm not going to go with you tomorrow because my date's been canceled. So, okay. So I didn't go with him on that fatal weekend. And of course, he played his first date, and then they got on the plane to go to Wisconsin. And that's when his plane crashed. So, and a good friend of mine, a DJ friend of mine in Milwaukee, called me that Sunday. I was home and watching television. And he said, did you hear about Otis? And I'm going, I thought he was going to tell me Otis had a great show or something like that. But he knew both Otis and I. He knew us both. And I said, no. I said, I know his show was probably great. He said, no, Otis's plane just crashed. And the DJ was kind of a guy that joked all the time too. And I remember telling him, don't joke about that, man. I said, don't even go there. I said, just, he said, no, I'm in the radio station. And at that time they had ticker tapes and it was coming through on the ticker tape, but I'm watching television. I don't see anything on TV for it. So I thought he was joking. And I said, you kidding me? He said, no, I'm reading it off now. It's coming on the ticker tape here. And I just hung the phone up on him. I didn't say another word. And I'm staring at the TV and I kept thinking, I said, well, Otis is a good swimmer and I knew he could swim well. I said, he'll be all right. And he said he fell in Lake Moana or something. I said, well, he'll be all right. He's a good swimmer. And I kept waiting to hear something on the TV that he's been rescued or something like that. And then across the trailer on the bottom of the TV started running across that his plane had crashed in bad weather and he was missing, and all of the little barcades. And Otis had heard the barcades for the first time up. I had a club in Memphis called the Tiki Club. And the barcades were my little house band on the weekends, Friday and Saturday. And that's where Otis first heard them. They were playing on the weekend up there and he came up to the club. And then they started working some dates on the road with Otis. And I'm saying, I just could not believe it. So I got up and got in my car. And to this day, I cannot tell you where I went. I drove, because it was about 6:30 that evening when I saw this on the TV scrolling through. And I got up, got in my car, and I started driving. And I must have driven for like an hour, almost an hour and a half. I wound up in the front of Stax Records. All the lights were on and people were crying and stuff, the people that were there. And they were on the phones trying to find out what was going on and what had happened. And, but I realized that now I was driving around for an hour and something. I don't remember where I was going. I was at Nome. And it was just the nightmare of a day for me, you know, because we had spent the whole week there in the studio and stuff. So it was just a bad situation.
Wow. And to think that you could have been on that plane as well. I mean, not only
I
to
could
lose your
have been
friend,
very,
but
very true. And I just to this day, there were two people that, of course, Ben Cawley was on the plane, but he said he unbuckled his seatbelt, and when the plane cracked in half, it threw him out in the water. He was the only one that survived the plane crash. James Alexander went on a commercial flight because they had only had so many seats there or something. So he took a commercial flight. So he was saved. So the only two barcades was Ben Cawley and James Alexander that was saved on the flight.
wow. When Stax closed down, because you talk about the family environment and the closeness of the artists and the record company, what did that do to you?
It was really a bad time for all the artists, especially us, because we had started with Stax. We started with it when it was Satellite Records. And from the ground up, and we just, as kids, as teenagers and young people, we didn't ever think Stax would end. So when it did, it didn't end because we didn't have hit records. It was pseudo political, pseudo all of that, and then a lot of stuff went on uh, with that. And when it closed, when it filed for bankruptcy, we had hit records on the charts, and it was crazy like that. But we didn't think it would end, and a lot of artists lost everything because they didn't have a business sense of the word, so they just lived from day to day and partied and everything. But thank goodness I had my publishing and I had my record label. I had a production company at that time of my own. And I was able to survive, so I didn't lose my house, my cars, or any physical stuff like that. It was just sad that we had spent all of our youth from teenagers into being 30 some years old and 14 years at Stax, and all of a sudden it's gone. And when it left, not in a good way, they tore it down and left just a vacant lot there with bottles, beer bottles and liquor bottles all strewn on it. And literally, because I had moved, Booker wanted a change of scenery. I wanted a change of scenery. I moved to Atlanta because my manager at that time lived in Atlanta. Booker moved to LA. And when I would drive back there, it was just, you would almost cry just to see that block of Stacks that was just a vacant lot with and nothing on it. And it was a bad time for everybody. Some of the artists that had some business savvy were able to do it. Some signed with different labels that offered money to them. And I stayed at Stax until about 6 months before the very end, but you could see the handwriting on the wall. We were in a spiral drop, and you knew that we couldn't pull out of it. And because money had been advanced and the way it was, they just systematically put us out of business and then wanted to make a production company out of the record company. And Al Bell at the time was heading it up because he had taken over from Jim. And he just refused to do it. And I stayed there until, like I said, in lieu of my royalties, in lieu of me, two or three other, I think Eddie and two or three other acts, in lieu of royalties and everything, we stayed there at the company just so that we could try to keep it afloat. And but nothing since our distributor. To give you an example, usually if we had an artist that habitually sold 200,000 records, which is, we would initially order 50,000 records to promote and market initially. Rather than order 50,000, they would order 20,000 or 25,000. In other words, they were honoring their contract, but not to where we could survive because we still had to pay back the money that had been borrowed and still try to operate. And when you knew anything about the business end of it, that's what was going on. They just froze us out of business. And I told Jim and Al, it was amicably when I split. I told him, I said, well, for the sake of my family and my personal welfare, I've got to look further, and they understood, and they, I think I had about maybe another year or something on a contractual structure, but they said, fine, you're free to go.
I'm going to try to move ahead a little bit because of time restrictions. But I was curious about you talking about writing songs and not having hits for a little while, and you were kind of frustrated. Do you know a hit? I mean, you've written so many great songs, and it's hard for me to imagine that you were frustrated you weren't writing great songs or the songs weren't getting traction. There's a big difference between a good song and a hit song, correct?
That is correct, but you never know what the public is going to buy. You try to write honestly, and you write about situations and subjects that the ordinary person would come in contact with, and not from an introspective thing of your own personal life, but observations and stuff that you see happening. And I can't just predict a hit record. I know when a song is good, it tells a good story, the melodic structure is good, the recording of it, the arrangement, all of that comes into play. But you can't just predict if it's going to hit, because sometimes you can take 15 minutes and write something, put it out there, and it's just timing is everything. And the public, this is something that they needed to hear, and it's a hit. But if you write a good song, the lasting aspect of it is there, because people will identify with it. They'll hum the melody, whistle the melody, sing the lyric or whatever. It's just like a good example of that. Now, when I do concerts, I've got three generations in my. I got the grandkids, the parents, and the grandparents now in my concerts, and I see all three generations singing the lyrics to my songs. Because what you realize, especially when you start traveling and touring and going abroad, overseas and everything, people are people the world over. They have the same frustrations, wishes, aspirations. And if you write about life, they can identify with it. So I try to do that and write honestly about it. I can take a hypothetical situation, I'll write how I would react as just a normal person, not as a superstar or something like that, as a normal person in that situation, if I were caught into that situation. And usually people can identify and relate to it. So I know if I write something like that, that people can relate to it, and I'm not writing in parables like they're going to have to wonder about what does he mean by that line. No, it's cut and dry. The way I express it, that's what it is. It's cut and dry. So I try to write like that, and not write for generations. I write about life, because each generation expresses the same thing, a different time, but the overall life thing goes on, and it's the same repeated life cycle. And when you realize that, and then you go to different countries and different cultures, and you realize, okay, they've got the same things that happen to them. I was talking to give you an example, I was in England and I was talking to Tom Jones, and he's a fan of mine. I'm a big fan of his. And we were talking, and he said, we've got the same kind of upbringing. And I'm going, he came out of church. He came out of the coal mines in Wales. I didn't have it too easy. I mean, I worked for my living. And he said, I started at an early age and I was singing, I liked the Black music. And I said, I like all kinds of music because I was exposed to country music. Growing up in Memphis, we did backup work for the Pepper organization behind the Running Mills Sap, all these country acts and stuff. I knew Elvis, so I'm saying, I just love music. A good song is a great song, whether it's country, whether it's pop, whether it's whatever. And I've realized that since my stuff has been cut by so many genres of music, if I write a good song, people will identify with it no matter who you are, no matter what nationality you are, because that human factor, you're feeling the same things and you're going through the same thing. So that's what I do. I write, and I can't tell if it's a hit, but I know within my own self, after listening back from the speakers and different systems, it's a good song, it's a good performance, it's a good production. Now it's up to the public to accept it. But I do know it's a good song, yeah.
So were you surprised when Billy Idol had a hit with "To Be Your Lover" from your song?
Quite honestly, I was. And the reason for it is that when his record company, they called me and said, we just cut a smash on Billy Idol on one of your songs. And I said, great, because I knew of him. And I said, but which song? I Forgot to Be Your Lover. Now I'm open-minded as a creator, but I'm saying, how did he hear anything on a soft romantic ballad on I Forgot to Be Your Lover? This is what I'm thinking in my mind when I'm talking to him on the phone. So I said, would you send me a copy? Would you mind sending me a copy? And they said, oh yeah, we're gonna send you a copy. We're just letting you know you got a smash on it. Okay. So when I got the copy, I put it on, I listened to it. For his genre of music, it worked, but it was totally different from what he took it. And I love that when an artist can not copy what you do, but they can take your work and make it theirs. Aretha took Respect from Otis and made it hers. Mm-hmm. Billy Idol took I Forgot to Be a Lover and made it To Be a Lover, and put it in a boxing ring. So it for his generation and for his genre of music, it worked for him, and it was one of his biggest hits. I think it sold like 6 or 7 million copies. So I'm saying that once, and it took me probably 4 listenings to process what he heard in this soft ballad. And I'm saying, okay, but then I'm thinking commercially now. I'm saying, okay, I see how he worked that. He up-tempoed it and it worked. And so finally, after listening about 4 times, I really got into it. I'm saying, okay, but at first it puzzled me. How did he hear that? And then right after that, Jaheim did it, on a more of a urban hip hop style, and he had a couple of million sellers on it. So, and his was part rap, part, but you look at that and you say, that idea, that story is still relevant no matter what generation you are.
Do you consider yourself more of a songwriter than a performer, or do you distinguish the two? Is there one over the other?
I think of myself as a performer, because I cut my eye teeth before I started writing songs. I was a performer. But my manager made me acutely aware that you're a creator, you're a songwriter. Not many people can do that. Embrace that. So I started thinking of myself, and even though I was writing my own stuff, but still I didn't think of myself as just being a prolific songwriter. I'm writing stuff that I've experienced or that I've observed that other people, and I'm a people watcher. So I would sit in clubs sometimes in the back of the club, and I'd watch people's reactions when they first come through the door. And after a couple of drinks or after midnight, I'd watch their reactions. And it always was a little bit different in some aspect. And I would write about that. But then I had to start looking at myself as a creator and a writer. But at first, I didn't think of myself basically. I was thinking of myself as a singer, performer.
Okay, so I'm going to try to wrap this up soon, but I do have a few more questions. One
Okay.
is your comeback album, and I don't know if you see it as a comeback album, but the album that you released a few years ago, which won the Grammy.
Right.
It has a song on it called "The Three of Me," which is the opening track, which is a stunning tune. And the concept of there's a man I used to be, there's a man who I am, and there's a man who I want to be. It's
Want to
just
be right.
yeah, it's brilliant. Anyway, tell me about I believe you were the youngest solo artist to be signed by Stax. You released this album in 2016, 2017, and you're now back on Stax as I believe the first one to be reassigned to Stax.
Mhm.
How did that feel?
It felt wonderful because it's like it's full circle.
Yeah.
Uh, and I realized, I've had a great career. I feel very fortunate in having the fans stick by me and having the hits through the years that kept me viable in the industry and stuff, and having other artists uh, relate to what I'm writing and cutting stuff. And I've been very fortunate, but it felt good to be back on Stax after all this time. And they needed something to kind of kick them off in the reissues and all of this stuff. And I'm saying, okay, this is the reason that I'm in the industry, is that Jim Stewart let me come on some neighborhood kid, come in here and learn a craft. And after almost 70 years, I'm still doing it. So it felt really good. And for me to be able to work with another producer, John Leventhal, and he's basically a country producer, but he had been a fan of mine since he had a little band in high school, he said. So, and it showed because he knew me as an artist. That was the first artist that I had worked with that I felt really comfortable with him. And from the first meeting, we felt comfortable because we didn't try to create, we just picked each other's minds and talked for about 2 hours. And he made the trip from New York to my studio in Atlanta. And we talked for about 2 hours, and he was telling me he knew my discography and all that, and he had been a fan, and I was a fan of his father-in-law's and his wife, because he was married to Roseanne. He's married to Roseanne Cash, who's Johnny Cash's daughter. So I said, well, and of course I'm from Memphis, and I was a friend with the the Phillipses, over at Sun Records, where Johnny and Jerry Lee and all those guys, and we all knew each other, So I said, this is funny. This is really, after all these years, it's back to square one both ways. I'm working with a country producer, first one ever other than Chips. Chips was working for Stax, but then he started producing Elvis, and then he started producing stuff for his American music label, and he produced everybody there, from Willie Nelson to everybody. But I'm saying it's the music that ties us together, you know, and a good song is a good song. Mark Cohen was a good friend of John Leventhal's. And John and I were in the studio one day, and Mark called the studio, and John said, well, I'm here working with William Bell. He said, oh, let me talk to William. Oh, man, I got an idea. I think it would be a great song for you.
Wow.
Now he said, I don't have anything but a title. Okay, give me the title. That kicks off everything. The three of me. And I had to think about that for a while. Now, is that some schizophrenic guy? Is that some, you know? No, let me put it in perspective from a life perspective, how you've lived your life, you know, and boom, I started talking it over with John and everything. So I said, okay. And I told Mark, I said, we're gonna work on this. And we worked it up one afternoon with John playing guitar, me singing the whole song. And we liked it so well. We said, well, let's just put the guitar and you down on it. Okay, I'll do that. So we did vocal and guitar on it. And then I went back to the hotel that night, and there were a couple of lines and stuff in there that I didn't like how I had phrased it, but I wanted the lines to pertain to the same situation. So I put my thinking cap on and said, okay, I can phrase it this way and mean the same meaning, but it's different. So that's what I did. And we worked on it for about 2 days. And then we called Mark to listen to it. And he just said, man, and that was the first song we worked on.
And it's the first song on the album.
We knew we had something special then because that song clicked. And when we would sit down to write, it's just like when I was writing with Booker, we wrote so much stuff together until I could start on a passage of a melody. And he just played the chord, the chord next to that. And I'm going, okay, yeah, how do you know I was going there? I just felt that. That's the right chord for this song, yeah. So, and John was the same way. So it worked out. We got the first Grammy for it. It was the Grammy that kicked off the new Stax, kicked me off. And all of the young people that work at Concord, they had done their homework. They knew who William Bell was, both past and present, and now future. And usually that's unusual because you change labels, you got to reinvent yourself to the people that's working for that label. But they knew who I was, and that was important to me. And it just worked out for everybody concerned, and it's been a win-win situation for everybody.
Well, it's a stunning album. This Is Where I Live is the title of the album, and
yes,
it's a beautiful album from the very beginning to the very end. So thank you very much for sharing that music. I know you have to go. Do you have another album?
Are you working on another project now? It'll be like a culmination of a thing. I'm contemplating not retiring from the industry, but retiring from touring a lot and doing that. At my age now, it's like, you know, your mind says yes, but your body says no. To ride 200 miles now to get someplace, even if you're on a plane, you're a little bit stiff when you get up. So. Yes. But I've been fortunate. My health is good. I tell somebody all the time, they always laugh. I say, I can scratch my own itch. So I'm in good shape. For a person to be 82, I'm in wonderful shape. No complaints. I have no no axe to grind with anybody in the industry or anything like that. And I'm having fun. That's the key thing. I'm still enjoying what I'm doing. So I don't want to ride this horse until I'm not happy with what I'm doing. I'm having fun with it. And I told my management, I said, you will never have to roll me in a wheelchair on stage. And you will never, if I can't stand up for an hour and a half and do a concert, I'd rather retire. And I've seen some artists that just keep going, and they're not, as an artist, no matter what they accomplished in the past, as an artist, they're not able to duplicate that in their later lives. And it's understandable, especially if you play an instrument or even vocally. Mm-hmm. But I haven't had to change any of my keys for any of the songs and all of that. So I feel very blessed. And I will be in the industry, probably producing and writing. And I love working with young people, letting them fulfill their dreams and aspirations. And I work with the Stax kids, the Berkeley kids, the New York School of Music. And I don't know if you saw Take Me to the River, that movie we did.
Yes.
We're working on a new project for Take Me to the River. It'll be 3 now, because we did Take Me to the River 2 in New Orleans musicians. And then we had the first one with Stax. So now we're going to have the trilogy culmination of it for the third one. So I'm working with Martin, the director, producer on that, getting that together. So I'm pretty busy, and I've still got 4 acts of my own with my label, the Will Be Records, and working with them. I still do some concerts, but sparsely now.
Well, I got a chance to see you in New York about 4 years ago, and this is when I first met you, and I told you that I wanted to interview you. So, and that was a wonderful show. I hope I get to see you perform live again.
Well, we're going to do a retirement tour. It'll be about maybe 2 weeks of it. So I will let you know, and that'll be probably latter part of next year sometime, because the thing of it is we want to put it together to where it can be done with quality and promoted right and the whole thing. And we were going to do it a little bit earlier, but the COVID, of course, kind of put a screeching halt on a lot of stuff. So we are gearing back up. We're going to do another Take Me to the River, and I'm going to do another CD and all of that stuff, so that we'll have stuff to go along with that. But we're just having fun in the industry, still having fun.
Mr. Bell, I am so thrilled to do this interview with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh, my pleasure, and thanks for inviting. And we will definitely let you know when another retirement tour is coming up.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.